Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Dill. It's been, in my opinion, a phenomenal last couple of days for Mike Norvell, the Florida State Seminoles, not only on the recruiting front, which we're going to get into. You land two more commitments this afternoon to close out National Signing Day. I think more importantly, went out and hired a dynamite coaching staff. I think specifically on the defensive side of the football, you talk about Tony White and then Terrence Knighton coming along with him. Home run hires, in my opinion. Now, you're going to get a chance to sell the people on Gus Malzahn because that's the hire that I think has some Florida State fans. I don't know about questioning it is the right term, but maybe not as exciting of a hire. I know you're very fired up about Gus Malzahn. We're Michigan fans. We would have loved to have Gus Malzahn up in Ann Arbor. But I also want to talk about what Florida State has done on the recruiting trail the last couple of days as well. Now, before we get into it, as always, to the Florida State fans, it's been a wild last 12 months for this Florida State program. We've had a blast talking about it. The amount of support the Florida State fans continue to show to the boys, it's amazing. Appreciate you guys. It's going to be a really busy next couple of weeks for this program in the transfer portal. We're looking forward to breaking down those commitments. If you all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Dill, I'm going to give you a chance to talk real quick about the coaching staff, and then I want to get into, because I don't want to cover up for these two commitments. I think these are, especially LaJesse Harrold, he's a guy, and this was a guy that Michigan came in late on as well. For Florida State to get this one done, I think is massive. Dill, let's start with Gus Malzahn, because I think that's the hire that maybe doesn't generate as much excitement for some Florida State fans. I'm going to give you the tee box here. Pitch the people on Gus Malzahn.
No, I get the one thing you probably would wonder with Gus Malzahn is how motivated of a Gus Malzahn are you going to get? Because you feel like he's probably not exactly trying to go get another head coach job at this point. But I think one thing you look at, I mean, this is a guy who really just grinded out from the high school ranks on up.
Yeah.
I think he just loves football. I think he loves offensive football, similar to what Chip Kelly just wanted to get back to his roots, if you will. But at the end of the day, you look at Gus Malzahn, I think he did a really good job at Auburn. Now, obviously not like a super great end, but I think they just thought they weren't going to get over the Alabama hump, which, like, I don't know, would have anyone gotten over the Alabama hump at that point if you were Auburn? You look at what he did. He was always recruiting around the top 10, always brought in good players, always had really, really good offenses. So if you get a motivated Gus Malzahn who, again, wants to be there, wants to really just focus on the offense and do his thing, I think you got a really good coordinator in him, and also a guy who I think brings some stability to what was going on with his ability to like connect with coaches and high school recruits all around the country. I mean, a guy who has that type of network you would have wanted. I mean, if they can start recruiting that side of the ball at a high level, like Florida State,
the motivation is something that's it, because I do think that was part of it. It's like it's kind of an older coach that you might have felt like was on his way out of coaching, as opposed to like a Brennan Marion who's kind of climbing the ranks. I understand that skepticism. Dill, I think you nailed it though. At least in my opinion, he's back doing what he loves. Like, I don't know if Gus Malzahn loved being a head coach in the modern era of college football. Very similar to Chip Kelly, where it's like, hey, I just want to get back to coaching ball. Now, I'm sure Mike Norvell had the conversation like, hey, we got to recruit though. And that's something we talked about with these coordinator hires. That's never been a problem for Gus Malzahn. I think he's going to be as motivated as ever because he's back doing what he loves.
Look at where he was at UCF. I mean, he's punching way above his weight recruiting at UCF. Like, they've brought in relatively good players compared to what I frankly would have expected from that program. That, again, it's the fourth school in Florida at the end of the day. Like, they aren't Miami, Florida State, Florida, the three big boys, and he was able to go up and bang with those schools at times for certain commitments.
And you got the vibe that he was emerging as that fourth school. Like, let's not pretend like as a Florida State fan base, you weren't looking at UCF saying like, we're a little concerned about them kind of like getting a little bit more relevant in the state of Florida. I think it was a great hire. Now you look at Tony White, Terrence Knight. I don't think we got to sell anybody on those two. Tony White, 12 months ago, was getting talked about with head coaching jobs. He's largely regarded as one of the best defensive coordinators in this sport. And you got him to make a move from Nebraska to Florida State, and he was able to bring his best assistant with him in Terrence Knight. And we talk about how Florida State gets this thing going back in the right direction. I really do think it starts with line of scrimmage play. Terrence Knight can recruit his absolute tail off, but he's also a proven developer. You go back to the Nebraska defenses, great against the run, great rushing the passer. That's Terrence Knight, baby. Like, I think that defensive staff with Tony White and Terrence Knight gets significantly better than what you were looking at. And you talk about player development. We all know how talented this Florida State defensive line was. You had legitimate scouts, and of course the beat writers, but the scouts too, saying this Florida State defensive line might be the best in the country. Didn't play nearly like that in 2024. Terrence Knight's a maximizer. He's going to be able to get the best out of these defensive linemen. Let's talk about these two commitments, though.
Two guys who, again, like you look at maximizing, if you can maximize these two really interesting traits, which again is something for Florida State, you wanted to see a little more. Could you bring in a little more raw talent from high school and bring them cradle to the grave, if you will, to the NFL? That just wasn't something that was happening. A lot of transfer portal action. And like you had some decent guys from high school, but you weren't developing guys from the high school level to the NFL nearly enough. These are two guys that if Terrence Knight does a job at a really high level, you got two potential NFL players kind of thing.
100%. And I also think fit what Tony White wants to do on defense. You look at LaJesse Harrold, I know exactly he's playing the jack linebacker spot for Tony White's defense. And, you look at him, say 6'5", 215 will add plenty of frame to add mass, a ton of length, and great get off the line of scrimmage, decorated track and field background. You said it best, dripping with traits. You maximize this kid, going to be a very good football player. Tylon Lee's like the less known name, I think, in the recruiting space, but also a really, really intriguing cat. What have we always talked about when we talk Nebraska defense under Tony White? What do we always talk about? Versatility on the defensive line. Tony White wants to give a lot of different fronts, and he wants to move guys all along the defensive line. I look at Tylon Lee and say he could be a heavy-handed edge rusher. Kind of reminds me a little bit about Jamari Butler, who just hit the transfer portal for Nebraska and might wind up at Florida State. Tylon Lee, a heavy-handed edge rusher, strong side edge rusher that can really do some things stopping the run. But he's also a guy that at 6'4", 250 can put on plenty of mass and be a 3-tech as well. And so you talk about some of the success Tony White had with that front. It was moving guys like Ty Robinson and Jamari Butler and Cam Lenhart all along the defensive line. I look at Tylon Lee and say defensive line chess piece, if you will. Could play edge, could play the 3-tech, could move them all around. And again, traits, length and athleticism. I like these two late additions until you look up and say, Florida State's got, according to some services, top 20 class in the country.
Which, again, like on its surface, maybe it doesn't wow you. And certainly if Mike Norvell is going to get this Florida State program to where it needs to be, you got to probably be hovering around the top 10-ish type classes year in and year out. But given what happened after this year, and given, like, again, how bad I feel like this could have gotten, because I feel like what you said like 10 days ago, you were looking like, man, how does Florida State even exactly like crawl out of what just happened? Because you don't see teams have that type of year. I mean, we're like 2-10, like that's preposterous for a Florida State program. So the fact that they were able to hold their big, like hold guys like Kevin Wynn in that class, obviously
Kevin Wynn was such. I love this guy. I think he should be a 5-star. Kevin Wynn's one of my favorite defense, and he fit. Talk about fit, like that's Nash for Florida State in the middle of that defensive line. Like that's a true nose. That is heavy hands, but he gives you a ton of juice as well from the inside. That's massive, not only because he's a really good football player, but he's going to be a guy that plays early within this Tony White defense. And again, let Terrence Knight get to work with this kid because I think he could be special. So moving forward for Florida State, and we actually talked about this a little bit earlier today. You got a solid class. And like you said, you want to get close to that top 10, but this was a night, like the bottom could have fallen out for this 2025 class. Now you're talking about top 20 class in the country. Here's my biggest takeaway, or my biggest ask for Florida State. Go grab, and I'm kind of interested to hear your take on this. Go grab some known commodities in the transfer portal. Didn't it feel like last year it was kind of a combination of, all right, we missed on some high school evaluation. We don't develop the way we should. So the high school crop of talent just wasn't playing to the level. And then you double down with, they kind of missed in the portal. A lot of these guys we were really excited about. Guys like Malik Benson, guys like TJ Ferguson just weren't good enough players. That's because I feel like they took a lot of big swings. You know what I mean? Like lottery ticket kind of guys. Malik Benson, TJ Ferguson, 4-star recruit. I mean, coming out of high school, this was a guy that, hey, we like a lot. Well, there's a reason that he wasn't on the football field all that much for Alabama. Turns out he wasn't necessarily the player you thought he was going to be. Malik Benson, very similar. Trace, 10-4 in the 100-meter dash, big-bodied. There was probably a reason that he wasn't on the field that much for Bama either. What I would like to see for Florida
You
State.
could probably even make a similar claim about DJU. It's like you'd never seen him play great college football. Like he was solid at Oregon State for sure. I wouldn't want to downplay what he did, but you never saw like ultra high level
Yes.
production. I wouldn't say so. It's like everything. I think you kind of said it. Like a lot of it was betting on can we get these guys in and quickly turn their play around. And again, I don't want to like DJU was what he was, and he obviously played really poorly for Florida State. But I do think there's like a point of like, yeah, they probably need to mix in some guys who just play.
This is not me defending DJU's play in 2024, but it was, I don't like what quarterback was going to have success in that offense. It was the worst rushing offense at the Power 4 level. They could not pass protect. The wide receivers couldn't catch anything. So it's like, yeah, you probably missed on DJU. He wasn't what you thought he was going to be. That offense was a problem in terms of development of the offensive line and what you saw from the pass catchers. What I would like to see here is go get known commodities. Like, okay, they might not necessarily have all-American upside, but they're going to be solid pieces for a Power 4 program. And then if you can hit on some of these young cats, that's to me how you get this thing turned around.
Well, see, I even wonder, like, do you bring in that big of a portal class in general, or do you like?
Yes,
I'm not sure this is like a 1-year fix though for Florida State because there needs to be a sort of fundamental philosophical shift in how they run their program because it was far too portal heavy. I think everybody kind of knows that. Now I'd look at like they're keeping that 2024 class around. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of
attrition,
groundswell of guys who are hitting the portal or hinting at it. Like they keep that kind of class around. That was the type of class, frankly, if Florida State was doing year in and year out, they put themselves in a really good position. Now I do wonder, do you like go with a portal class like for lack of a better term, like a Colorado or an Ole Miss, where it's like kind of you're turning your whole roster around?
No.
Because part of me wants to see them be able to build that pipeline out a little better and not run their younger guys off.
I don't think
they do have a really good 2024 class that I think
I agree 100. And I'm not arguing against that, but there are so many spots on this roster that if you want to win 8 games in 2025, you need to address in the transfer.
But I don't mean like you turn into Clemson. I just like, do you think you can already go to a more balanced approach this year? Do you think?
No, I think you got to bring in some veterans and let these young kids kind of put them in the crock pot for a year. Have some veterans that give you that high floor. And if some of these young cats really step up, that's probably how you get to 9-10 wins. But even if they don't and they need another year of development, I mean, 8 wins get this thing going in the right direction. I think a lot of Florida State fans understand this is probably not a 1-year turnaround. In fact, that's probably what got Florida State into trouble in the first place, like trying to turn around that 2023 team into 2024 so desperately. And we took so many big swings on the portal and we missed on the portal. I want to see it, and it's not necessarily a conservative take, but it's more, hey, go get some guys that you know are going to be solid football players. They might not offer the upside that a Malik Benson does, but go get some good football players, go stack some wins in 2025, and get this thing going back in the right direction. That's kind of how I see it being played out. I'm excited to see Florida State and like where they decide to go in the transfer portal. We'll obviously break down the commitments. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear like some thoughts and opinions on that conversation. I think it's a fascinating one. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.